Good evening, everybody.
Namaskar, Swamiji.
Namaskar, namaskar.
Pranam Maharaj.
Pranam, pranam.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Hari Om.
Pranam Maharaj.
Hi, namaskar, Mrs. Mukherjee.
Namaste, namaste, Swamiji.
Yes, namaste, Sureshji. Namaste.
Namaskar, Swamiji.
Yes, Patiksha, namaskar. It's quite hot here. Those who don't know, it is 113. 113 outdoors.
That is hot. That's quite uncomfortable.
Yes. Of course, indoor it is 83. My room is cooler. My room is in shade, under a shade. So,
Does it drop at night?
no, this is the problem. Nowadays, the temperature is not cooling down even at night. Last night also it was, as far as I was awake, it was 85 or 84.
Oh my goodness. But it's dry heat, I guess, not humid.
What's that?
Is it dry or humid?
It's a dry.
Dry.
It's dry.
That's Swami, my room's at 94 right now.
Oh, good, good. 94 seems to be, now cooler. Now 94 appears to us, oh, 94, it is nothing, it is cooler. We can tolerate that. Yes, good evening, Barbara, thanks. I am hearing only white noise. Alexandra, oh, what's wrong with you? My voice is clear to all of you? Okay.
Yes, Swamiji.
Yes, we can hear.
Alexandra, I don't know what is wrong with you. Are you using any headgear? Maybe that is not connected properly. Is it okay now, Alexandra? Yeah, everyone else can hear well. So there must be some problem with the headphone, the connection. Maybe you should let go of the headphone. All right, time for our class. So as we know, we are learning to chant one beautiful hymn called Shiva Manasa Puja, mental worship of Lord Shiva. We have learned 2 stanzas so far. Today we are going to learn the 3rd stanza. Going to share the, okay, good, Alexandra, good that you can hear. Okay, today we shall learn the 3rd stanza of the hymn. For that, I am going to, yes, share the screen. All right. So first we shall read the translation together. Then there will be chanting. First call and response, then chant along. Okay, so 3rd stanza is like this. Let's read it together. A canopy, 2 yak-tail whisks, a fan, a spotless mirror, a veena, kettle drums, a mridanga, and a drum. Songs and dancing, full prostrations, and many kinds of hymns. All these I offer you in my imagination. O Almighty Lord, accept this, my worship of you. One thing about kettle drums, mridanga, and drum is in the worship of Shiva, especially in traditional places of Shiva, such as Varanasi, they play different types of drums. They say that the sounds of these drums make Shiva happy. So mridanga is a kind of drum, usual drum is a drum, kettle drum is a smaller drum. All these are used for worship of Shiva. And the devotee, that is Acharya Shankara, is saying, all these and more I am offering to you, Shiva, but in my imagination. Okay, first call and response. Chatram chamarayor yugam. Chatram chamarayor yugam. Vyajanakam. Vyajanakam. Chadarshakam nirmalam. Chadarshakam nirmalam. Veena bheri mridangaka. Veena bheri mridangaka. Halakala. Halakala. Geetam cha nittam tatha. Geetam cha nittam tatha. Shashtangam pranati. Shashtangam pranati. Stutir bahubidha. Stutir bahubidha. Hyetat samastam maya. Hyetat samastam maya. Sankalpeno samarpitam. Sankalpena samarpitam. Tava vibho. Tava vibho. Pujam grihana prabho. Pujam grihana prabho. Now we shall chant together. First slowly, then faster. Chatram chamarayor yugam. Vyajanakam. Chadarshakam nirmalam. Veena bheri mridangaka. Halakala. Geetam cha nittam tatha. Shashtangam pranati. Stutir bahubidha. Hyetat samastam maya. Shankalpena samarpitam tava vibho pujam grihana prabho. Sankalpena samarpitam tava vibho pujam grihana prabho. Now, faster. Chatram chamarayor yugam vyajanakam chadarshakam nirmalam Veenavheri mridangaka halakala Geetam cha nittam tatha Shashtangam pranati stutir bahubidha Hetat samastam maya Shankalpena samarpitam tava vibho pujam grihana prabho. Sankalpena samarpitam tava vibho pujam grihana prabho. We have one more stanza like this. Then the fifth stanza will be of a different tune. We shall see that. Does anybody have any question about the chanting? Any? You may unmute yourself and ask question if you have. All right. All right, so we are studying a devotional text called Narada Naradiya Bhakti Sutras. That is aphorisms related to devotion in accordance with Narada. And we have completed how can one tell this chant is to Lord Shiva. Only at one place towards the end, in the fourth stanza, it will be clear that it is related to Shiva, where it will come Atmanam Mati Sahachara, something like that, and Girija, all these words that will make it clear that this hymn is for Shiva. We shall see that in our next class. Returning to Naradiya Bhakti Sutra, Narada's aphorisms on divine love. We have studied the first 24 aphorisms, which is a section on what is devotion. What is this supreme devotion? Para Bhakti. Para means supreme devotion. So we have seen, and now we are reviewing the entire section. First we reviewed aphorisms 1 to 6, which dealt with the definition and meaning of supreme devotion. Then in our last class, we had a review on aphorisms 7 to 14, which was basically one pointed this characteristic of this supreme devotion is one-pointed love to God and surrendering everything, depending upon God and seeing all other supports as nothing but divine grace alone. Now we are in the third subsection, we may say, third subsection of the first section, aphorisms 15 to 24, which are different expressions of this supreme devotion and examples of that. So in the very beginning, we noted that the supreme devotion for God is in fact an ineffable experience. When we try to express the characteristics of that ineffable experience called para bhakti, there arises different forms and styles of bhakti. The expressions of bhakti may be different depending upon the seeker or depending upon the individual. In the next few aphorisms, 15 to 24, Narada will present three prominent expressions of bhakti before presenting his own view about the characteristics of this supreme devotion. Aphorism 15, he says, aphorism 15 is like this: in accordance with different viewpoints, the characteristics of that bhakti are being told now. So there is no difference in opinion about the essential nature of bhakti. What is the essential nature of bhakti? It is of the nature of supreme love, ecstatic love for God. But how that bhakti expresses or manifests in the life of devotees, that might differ. Example, some may be interested in ritualistic worship. Some might be interested in devotional song. Some like to talk, read, speak about the life stories of divine incarnations. For some, like Ramanuja, it is engagement in loving meditation. For some, the devotion may manifest itself as loving service to all humanity. For some, it might express as singing and dancing in the name of God. Then also we find Acharya Shankara. He says that constant thought on one's real nature is bhakti. So there might be different expressions of that divine love, different external manifestations of that divine love. Narada takes up three views about this manifestation, and later on we shall see that there is a pattern why he chose these three manifestations or three expressions of divine love. First, he takes up in aphorism 16 the viewpoint according to Vyasa, a sage who composed many important scriptural books. So according to Vyasa, Narada says, the aphorism goes like this: Vyasa says, bhakti is love for doing puja and other such devotional activities. According to sage Vyasa, bhakti is what? How we shall know that someone has got that supreme devotion, that ecstatic love for God. According to Vyasa, it will manifest as a love for puja and other such devotional activities. Puja means ritualistic worship, where there is some rules and patterns and some procedures, some steps to be followed. That is ritualistic worship. And other such devotional activities, that means it could be Homa, the fire ceremony. It might mean the Vespar, evening Vespar Arati. It could be Manasa Puja, like mental worship, as we did in the beginning of our class, mental worship of Lord Shiva. It might mean Karma Yoga, doing every act as an offering to God. Then it might also mean worship of the entire creation, which is called the puja of the Virat. Virat. The entire cosmos is divine manifestation, and serving all is worship of that Virat. But common to all of these is a sense of reverence, a sense of sacredness, and a sense of offering. That is what the essence of puja is. With admiration and correct understanding, ritualistic worship becomes a most lovable activity for a devotee. And as we noted in the class, puja is in fact a wonderful practice where dualism and non-dualism merge. In our class, we discussed to some extent the philosophy and significance of ritualistic worship, which is really breathtaking. In a nutshell, puja means the worshipper first becomes one with God. That is non-dualism. Then they separate themselves from God and worship God as a guest, a loving treatment of guest. First, the worshipper elevates oneself with different mantras and rituals, try to elevate themselves to the level of God, become one with God. Then they again come down to the plane of dualism and treat God as a guest, a loving treatment of the guest. That is what puja is. Puja is a wonderful devotional activity. Great teachers of religion, even after realization, they kept themselves engaged in puja. And this love, anurag, love, liking for puja is a sign of bhakti. What kind of bhakti? Para bhakti. An innate love, a spontaneous love for puja is a sure sign of bhakti. This is what Vyasa says. Then aphorism 17. And this is what sage Gargo, another sage Gargo, what he said about bhakti. The aphorism goes like this. Gargo says bhakti is love for hearing divine play, etc. Love for hearing divine play. So divine play, as we know that every divine incarnation, in the life of every divine incarnation, whatever happened, whether it is mystical, it is commonplace, non-mystical, miraculous, all these are called divine play. And katha, katha means hearing about them, reading them, speaking about these different actions, events that happened in the life of divine incarnations. That is katha. And Gargo says that if someone has love, true love, then they love to dwell upon this divine pastime, divine play of divine incarnations. The aphorism mentions etc. So etc. means not only hearing divine play, but also reading. It might mean singing. It might mean chanting. It might mean contemplating those divine events. And we, the aspirants, the seekers, how we can enjoy the divine Leela, because we were not fortunate to be with the divine incarnations. So for us, how can we enjoy the divine pastime? That is through engaging in katha, that is in listening, in narrating and contemplating those divine play. And the psychology behind this is we love to talk and think about people we love. Familiarity is a great factor for our liking someone. So by narrating, by listening, by reading the stories of divine play, of divine incarnations, we start developing love for them. And that is we find exemplified by great devotees. They used to speak, they used to dwell on these divine plays of different incarnation. For example, Tulsidas, a saint, a great lover, used to speak about Lord Rama only. In recent time, Mahendranath Gupta, M, always used to speak about Sri Ramakrishna, what Sri Ramakrishna used to say, what Sri Ramakrishna used to do. Apart from writing such a great book called Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, he always spoke about Sri Ramakrishna. That was his way of engaging with the divine play. Then Mirabai, she used to speak only about Sri Krishna. Saint Paul, all about Jesus Christ. So summary of this aphorism is, according to sage Garga, immense joy in hearing, reading, talking, singing, or contemplating divine pastime is a sure sign of supreme devotion or para bhakti. Then the third viewpoint, aphorism 18, is according to sage Shandilya. Shandilya was another sage who himself composed another text called Shandilya Bhakti Sutra. He wrote another text on devotion. Narada takes Shandilya's view. So aphorism 18 goes like this. Sage Shandilya says, Bhakti is unbroken absorption in the bliss of Atma, the self within, spirit within. The unbroken absorption in the bliss of Atma, Atma Rati. And as we noted, that's a wonderful word, Atma Rati. That is, one gets all their joy from within, as if a joy is welling from deep within, reveling in Atma. That is a constant feeling of oneness or connectedness with the divine presence within, a constant sense of inner freedom, inner peace, a constant sense of spontaneity, a lightness. And these things we can find in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, that if we read the gospel or his life, one thing is certain, that there was always an air of spontaneity, freedom, joy, a childlike simplicity around Sri Ramakrishna. It is not that he was euphoric, ecstatic all the time, but there was a lightheartedness around Sri Ramakrishna, and that is Atmarati, the joy. This bliss is spontaneous. It is not dependent on anything outside. And it comes from the realization that God is in here. God dwells within. And the devotee feels a constant contact with the subtle presence of God within. According to sage Garga Sandillo, this constant contact with God within is a sure sign of bhakti, para bhakti. And as I said before, that there is a pattern in these three aphorisms. Why Narada chose these three views only? There were many other views, many other interpretations about para bhakti. So it appears that these three styles or forms of para bhakti deal with physical, verbal, and mental faculties of human beings. In Sanskrit, there is a phrase called kayeno manasa bacha. Kaya means through my physical body. Bacha means through my speech, and manasa means mentally. So puja, which was, according to Vyasa, is a sign of devotion. Puja mostly, we may say, is a physical activity. It's a kaika, through kaya, through body, physical body. Katha, which was according to Gorgo. Katha means listening and speaking about divine play. That is a verbal activity. And this Atma Rati is absorption in the indwelling divine presence. That is a mental, manasic activity. So, total engagement with all these three faculties is the best. Probably that is what Narada took as samples. One example of bhakti which engage our physical body. Another example from our verbal faculty, another from mental faculty. So we have these faculties, and why not engage all these faculties in service of God? Now, having stated all these three, okay, I think there is a question. Is Atmarati a sense of internal peace and joy, a quality that one tries to achieve through spiritual practice? Yes, Atmarati is a sense of internal peace and joy, and according to Shandilya, that comes from Parabhakti, from supreme devotion. When one has reached such a level of devotion that one finds that God is always within, dwelling, and we are never away from God, this Atmarati is expressed in the life of the devotee. All right. Now, having presented three viewpoints, Narada present his own. That's why he starts with but. He says, but Narada says, Bhakti is surrendering all actions to God and intense anguish upon not remembering God. So, Narada's view is a comprehensive view of bhakti. It is not only mental, not only physical, not only verbal, but it engages, it encompasses all our faculties, which covers all the three above, and most importantly, which is a culmination of all the three previous practices of bhakti. According to Narada, all actions, whether it is physical action, verbal action, or mental action, the sign of parabhakti is the devotee dedicates or feels that all their actions are an offering to God. That is a total surrender to God. So according to Narada, there are two components, two characteristics of parabhakti. One is total surrender to God, and second one is anguish upon forgetting God. So total surrender to God is a recurrent theme in Vedanta. In Upanishad, for example, Katha Upanishad says that one sees the glory of Atman by the grace of God. Bhagavad Gita, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you do, offer to me. Then Shiva Manasa Puja, we shall see the next stanza, stanza 4, which ends up with whatever action I perform, O Lord Shambhu, it is all your worship alone. In Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Patanjali mentions this devotional surrender to God at three places. Given the concise nature of the aphorisms mentioning of devotional surrender to God, means that Patanjali Yoga Sutras very much recommend this devotional surrender to God. One thing is sure from Patanjali Yoga Sutra, that devotional surrender to God expedites the process of samadhi. All good. Question is how to surrender everything to God. So we have to remember here there are two things to remember. One is real surrender comes spontaneously. But again, with practice, with practice of puja, with practice of katha, with practice of atmarati, surrender takes place in due course. With all these practices, surrender also takes place in due course. Initially, it is not easy. When we try to surrender, it is not real. We surrender something, again take back. We surrender our worries, but start again worrying. So in the beginning, it is like this, but with time, it becomes real. Then the devotee feels that whatever they are doing for God alone. So the sense of surrender becomes natural and spontaneous. The second characteristic of Parabhakti, according to Narada, is an intense anguish upon not remembering God. So a devotee of highest order who already has got Parabhakti, who surrenders every action to God, does not forget God even for a moment. But if at all they forget, they feel a great anguish. If the joy of unification with God is great, the pain of separation is also great. Such a sense of separation breaks the heart of the devotees, and such anguish is different from any other pain we experience. It is a sweet pain. And as I said, we get a glimpse of what this could be when we feel sometimes bad about missing our daily spiritual practices. If there is something we do daily and we love to do it, but if someday we have missed it, we feel bad about it. Now imagine that feeling, that anguish multiplied several times. That is the anguish of the devotee if they feel a separation from God. I see questions. Okay. Is Sandila's method similar to that of Shankara? No. Sandila's method is not similar to Shankara, but Sandila method is more a philosophical inquiry into the nature of bhaktis. How old is Narada Bhakti Sutras? It is believed that all the sutra literature flourished between 900, between 200 BCE, before Common Era, and 400 CE, Common Era. So probably Narada Bhakti Sutra were composed sometime in that period. How do you balance the surrender with the self-effort? How do you balance surrender with self-effort? So surrender, when real surrender happens, there is no question of self-effort. The devotee feels like everything is being done by God alone. Okay. And self-effort is needed until we have the firm belief or firm realization that God is doing everything. So the question should be rather, as long as we are practicing surrender, that practice is itself a self-effort. We need not think about balancing. Okay. We need not think about balancing. Actually, what we are trying to do in our present state, our sense, trying to surrender is also itself an self-effort. Okay, the next aphorism, having stated his point of view about what Parabhakti is, Narada says that, aphorism 20, there is example of such and such devotion, where the devotee surrenders everything to God and feels great anguish with the sense of separation, if there is a separation. So many examples of such devotion can be found. In India itself, in Vaishnava tradition, there are so many devotees in whose life these two characteristics of Parabhakti we can find, like Chaitanya, like Mirabai, like Nimbarka. Among the Christian mystics we find such ecstatic love and also anguish in the life of Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint John of the Cross, Saint Ignatius of Loyola. So in every tradition we find this kind of ecstatic love. So there, Narada says there is example of such and such devotion. That is, in aphorism 21, he says, just as was exemplified by the gopis of the Braja. Yatha Braja Gopikanam. Braja, as we noted, is another name for Vrindavan. So the gopis were the milkmaids of Vrindavan, the daughters and wives of the cowherd group of people. The gopis were enchanted by Sri Krishna from Sri Krishna's very childhood, and their leela, their pastime, their divine affair with Sri Krishna lasted till Sri Krishna was 8 years or at the most 10 years old. At the age of 10 or 8, Sri Krishna left Vrindavan for Mathura, never to come back again. And the gopis used to play with Sri Krishna collectively. Their relationship with Sri Krishna was not, although each gopi used to feel that probably Sri Krishna loves me most, but their affair with Sri Krishna, divine affair, this Leela, were always in a group, all together. That is a very sweet part of Bhagavatam. It is said that Bhagavatam is the topmost book on devotion. And in that, in the 10th book of Bhagavatam, the 5 chapters on Rasa Leela, the divine Leela of gopis and Sri Krishna, that is the cream of even of Bhagavatam. And we find that these gopis showed these two characteristics which Narada just mentioned. Their mind was always fixed on Sri Krishna. For example, in Bhagavatam, we find 10th book, 44th chapter, verse number 15, that some of the gopis of Mathura, where Sri Krishna went from Vrindavan, they were speaking among themselves like this. What they say? They say, the gopis of Vrindavan are the most fortunate because their minds are fully attached to Sri Krishna. They constantly sing about Sri Krishna while milking the cows, winnowing grain, churning butter, gathering cow dung for fuel, riding on swings, taking care of their crying babies, so on and so on, cleaning their houses, whatever work they are doing, their mind is always fixed on Sri Krishna. By their exalted Krishna consciousness, they automatically acquire all divine things. It is just one example, and in the class itself we saw other examples also that show how the gopis' mind were always fixed on Sri Krishna. And the second characteristic, extreme anguish when they feel a sense of separation from God. For the gopis, not to think of Krishna even for a moment was a big torture. When Sri Krishna disappeared during Rasa Leela, they became so engrossed with the loss, they started asking the creepers, the trees, the mud, the dirt of Vrindavan, if they had seen Sri Krishna. Such was their pain of separation from Sri Krishna. So Narada gives the example of the gopis that they exemplify these two characteristics of para bhakti, that is, remembering God always or surrendering all activities to God, and extreme pain or anguish by feeling a separation from God. Then there are three aphorisms, 22, 23, and 24, which we shall read together. So 22, 23, 24 translated this read like this. Even there, that is in the love of gopis, the doubt that the gopis were unaware of the greatness of Sri Krishna does not hold good. Without that awareness, their love would have been just like mundane love. In that ordinary mundane love, there is no happiness in the happiness of the beloved. What it means is, one might object or say that the gopis, they loved Sri Krishna just like a human being, just like a adorable toddler with some charismatic characteristics. So where is divine love there? Narada says this contention does not hold good, because gopis were aware of Sri Krishna's divine nature, divine stature. From very childhood, they witnessed Sri Krishna's many divine miracles, and they were convinced that it is Sri Krishna is incarnation of that great spirit, this Satchidananda, who has come down amongst us as a human being, but it is God alone. Gopis were aware of Sri Krishna's divine stature, but this awareness was not uppermost in their mind. That awareness could not overpower their sweet relationship with Sri Krishna. And as we noted in our original discussion on Leela, that this is the beauty or mystery of Leela, that those who are taking part in this divine Leela, this divine pastime, divine affairs, even though they are aware that they are taking part in Leela of God, they forget time to time about this greatness of God, so that this Leela can go on. So, although they were aware that Sri Krishna is divine incarnation, that awareness could not overpower their sweet, human-like relationship with Sri Krishna. Had there been not that awareness, their love would have been just like a mundane love. In ordinary love, one thing is missing. What is missing? That I am happy only with the happiness of my beloved. That is, no matter how I feel about it, if my beloved is happy, I am happy. This total absence of selfishness is what is missing in our common love. But that we find that in the case of the gopis were always mindful about Sri Krishna's happiness alone, irrespective of their own happiness. And during the class, I told you a few stories how gopis, when they came to know, although they were in great pain for their separation from Sri Krishna, who went away to Mathura from Vrindavan, but when the gopis came to know that Sri Krishna is happy there, they became so happy. And they told the messenger not to mention to Sri Krishna that they were feeling great anguish of this separation from Sri Krishna. Why? Because if Sri Krishna comes to know that the gopis are unhappy, suffering, Sri Krishna would also apparently will become unhappy about that. So this one story and several stories show that gopis' concern was only the happiness of Sri Krishna, irrespective of their own mental states. And Narada says that is possible only when the love is between devotee and God. And that love is Parabhakti, supreme devotion. According to Narada, the supreme devotion expresses itself in the life of such fortunate, a few rare fortunate devotees in two ways. One is total surrender to God, mind always fixed on God, God consciousness. Secondly, an anguish if there is a separation even for a moment. So with this review, we end the review of the first section of Narada's way of divine love. So aphorisms 1 to 6 were about definition and meaning of Parabhakti, supreme love. Aphorisms 7 to 14 were about one-pointed love and dedication for God. And aphorisms 15 to 24 were various characteristics and examples of Parabhakti. Next, aphorism 25 to aphorism 23 would be why the path of bhakti is superior. That Narada will present to us, that we shall see in our next class. Is there a link between Bhakti Vedanta movement and Narada Bhakti Sutra? Bhakti Vedanta movement does not have direct link with Narada Bhakti Sutras, but it is a text which they read a lot, discuss a lot, but their main text for discussion is Bhagavatam. Bhakti Vedanta movements is all built around Krishna consciousness, love for Sri Krishna. According to them, this love for Sri Krishna is in only one way, by taking delight in the dwelling on the different events of Bhagavatam. That is the mainstay of Bhakti Vedanta movement, which is also known as Hare Krishna movement, ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. To them, devotion is nothing but one's liking and one's total engagement with the text called Bhagavatam, that too the 10th book of Bhagavatam, which describes the life of Sri Krishna and his affairs, divine affairs with the devotees of Vrindavan. Another example of supreme devotion, Chaitanya Shiksha Shatakam Bhars Yuga Itam Nimish. Exactly, but that is not, that is a hymn Chaitanya has composed about this divine love, and when he is composing, he is idolizing the gopis of Vrindavan alone. So, do you have any question? You may ask, you may write in chat box. Of course, we already have discussed these things in detail. This is a review. So do you find this review was a bit detailed? Do you think it was okay? I mean, it could have been brief too, but I tried to do the review even in details so that it imprints in our mind, because the concepts are important. Concepts are important to understand bhakti intellectually. That's why I took 3 classes to review these 24 aphorisms. All right. Repetition and review helps a lot. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Larger concept, thanks. Okay, it was really good. And the notes too. Okay, yes. Even your notes, yes. I send notes every week, yes. If you, I don't know how many of you go through it, but I do it as a, karma yoga. I know that probably nobody watches the recording of the class, probably hardly anybody goes through the notes, but still I do in a spirit of karma yoga. Swamiji's Bhakti Yoga and connection with Narada Bhakti Sutra. It is believed that Swamiji's Bhakti Yoga, that is his lectures on Bhakti Yoga, were to large extent based on Narada's Bhakti Sutras. Okay. Para Bhakti Rahasya, then Gauni Bhakti, all these titles I have forgotten, but although as is some unique with Swami Vivekananda, he, whatever subject he will take up, he will make it so broad that he would, draw on from different sources. Even in Bhakti, he, although it is, I read somewhere that he gave these Bhakti Yoga classes based on Naradiya Bhakti Sutra, but there he brings concepts from Ramanuja's idea of Bhakti and many other sources. Even Upanishad he brings. Okay, thanks all. So now is the time for doing meditation. So I will take 1 minute of break for drinking a glass of water. Then we shall start the guided meditation. Okay, so give me 1 moment. I will stop my video and audio.